Tay wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the broken wires in front of him. The communication array had been giving problems for 3 days now, and nobody else wanted to fix it. So here he was, alone in the maintenance room of the Sol Orbital Station, working at 2 in the morning while everyone else slept. The year was 2347. And humanity had changed a lot since the old days. People now lived among the stars. They had built stations in orbit around Earth, colonies on Mars, and research bases on moons that their ancestors could only dream about. But the biggest change came 15 years ago, when humans discovered they were not alone in the universe. First contact happened on a Tuesday. A ship appeared near Jupiter, and the whole world held its breath. The aliens called themselves traders, and they came in peace. After that, more species made themselves known. The galaxy, it turned out, was full of life. Hundreds of intelligent species lived out there, trading, fighting, and building empires among the stars. But there was something strange. None of these aliens wanted to get too close to humans. They would trade from a distance. They would talk through screens and messages. But they never invited humans onto their ships. And they never asked to visit Earth. When human diplomats asked why, the aliens would change the subject, or simply go quiet. Tay did not think much about aliens. He was an engineer, not a diplomat. His job was to fix things. And right now, the thing that needed fixing was this communication array. He twisted 2 wires together and tested the connection. A green light blinked on. Finally, it was working. He stood up and stretched his back. His body ached from hours of work in a small space. The maintenance room was hot, because the climate control system was also broken. Someone was supposed to fix that tomorrow. But tonight, Tay had to suffer through it. He walked back to his private quarters. A small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that showed the curve of Earth below. The blue and white planet looked peaceful from up here. Tay had grown up in Busan, near the ocean. And sometimes he missed the smell of salt water and the sound of waves. But he had chosen this life. He had chosen the stars. The room was even hotter than the maintenance area. Tay checked the temperature panel on the wall. It showed 38 degrees. The cooling system had completely failed in his section of the station. He tried to open a vent, but no cool air came out. He sent a message to the repair team, but he knew nobody would come until morning. He would have to survive the heat for a few more hours. Tay removed his work uniform and dropped it on the floor. He was too tired and too hot to care about being proper. He fell onto his bed wearing nothing at all and closed his eyes. Sleep came fast. He was so exhausted that he did not even dream. Outside the station, far beyond what human sensors could detect, a ship watched in silence. It was long and silver, shaped like a blade cutting through the darkness of space. This was a Valori scouting vessel, and it had been observing the Sol Orbital Station for 3 weeks. The Valori were a species known for their intelligence and their caution. They had gray skin, 4 arms, and no eyes that humans would recognize. Instead, they sensed the world through vibrations and heat. They were scientists and researchers, always hungry for knowledge about the universe. For many years, the Valori had heard stories about humans. Other species whispered about them in fear. They called Earth a death world, a planet so dangerous that nothing should be able to survive there. They said humans were monsters who could adapt to anything, heal from terrible wounds, and fight with a fury that no other species could match. The Valori did not believe these stories. They thought the other species were exaggerating. Humans looked so soft and weak. They had no claws, no armor, no venom. How could such creatures be dangerous? But the Valori were careful. They wanted proof before they made any decisions about humans. So they sent this ship to watch and study. And tonight, they had decided to take the next step. On the bridge of the Valori ship, a researcher named Orin studied the data on her screen. She had found a human alone in a section of the station with broken sensors. The environmental controls had failed there, which meant the other humans were staying away from that area. It was perfect. Orin pressed a button and spoke to her team. Her voice was soft and clicking, like stones tapping together. She told them to prepare the extraction beam. They would take this human for study. They would finally learn the truth about these strange creatures from Earth. The beam was invisible to human eyes. It passed through the walls of the station like they were made of air. It found Tay sleeping in his bed, wrapped in nothing but the hot darkness of his room. Tay felt nothing. He did not wake up as the beam lifted him from his bed. He did not know that he was floating through the walls of the station, out into the cold vacuum of space, protected by a bubble of energy that the Valori had created. He simply kept sleeping, dreaming now of the ocean back home, of waves crashing against the shore. The Valori ship pulled him inside through an opening in its hull. Mechanical arms placed his naked body on a silver table in a holding chamber. The chamber sealed itself, and the ship began to move away from the station. Back on the Sol orbital station, nothing seemed different. The communication array was working again. The climate control system was still broken in Section 7, and Tay's room was empty, his uniform still lying on the floor where he had dropped it. In the morning, a woman named Yuna walked to Tay's door and knocked. She was his colleague and his friend. They were supposed to have breakfast together before their shift started. When he did not answer, she knocked again. Nothing. Yuna used her access code to open the door. She saw the empty bed, the clothes on the floor, and the heat still thick in the air. But no Tay. She checked the bathroom, the closet, everywhere. He was gone. She told herself not to worry. Maybe he had left early. Maybe he was in the cafeteria already. But something felt wrong. Tay always answered his door. Tay always kept his schedule. Yuna walked to the cafeteria and looked around. No sign of him. She checked the maintenance room where she knew he had been working last night. Empty. She started asking other people if they had seen him. Nobody had. By the time the sun rose over the Pacific Ocean, far below, Yuna knew something bad had happened. She just did not know what. She did not know that her friend was now millions of kilometers away, still asleep on a cold silver table, surrounded by aliens who wanted to understand what made humans so special. And she did not know that when Tay finally woke up, everything would change. Not just for him, but for every human in the galaxy. Because the universe was about to learn that the stories about Earth were not exaggerations. They were warnings. Tay opened his eyes and saw nothing familiar. The ceiling above him was silver and smooth, glowing with a soft blue light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air was cold against his skin, so cold that he could see his own breath forming small clouds in front of his face. He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy and strange. His muscles did not want to obey him at first. He pushed harder, forcing himself to move, and finally managed to rise into a sitting position. That was when he realized two things at once. First, he was completely naked. His skin was bare against the cold metal surface beneath him. Second, he was inside some kind of glass container. The walls around him were transparent, and beyond them, he could see a room filled with equipment he did not recognize. Strange machines blinked with lights of different colors, tubes and wires connected to panels covered in symbols that looked like nothing from any human language. And there were figures moving in that room. Tall figures with gray skin and 4 arms each. They had no eyes that Tay could see. Just smooth faces with small openings where a mouth might be. They wore white coverings that looked like lab coats, and they moved with a careful, precise grace that reminded him of surgeons. Tay's heart began to beat faster. He pressed his hands against the glass wall of his container and felt how cold it was. His breath came quick and shallow. This was not a dream. This was real. He had been taken. One of the gray figures turned toward him. It made a clicking sound, and suddenly all the others stopped what they were doing. They all turned to look at him. Tay could feel their attention even though they had no eyes. It was like standing in front of a crowd that was staring at him with intense focus. The first figure came closer to his container. It was taller than him by at least a head, and its 4 arms hung at its sides in a way that seemed relaxed but ready. It made more clicking sounds, and then a voice came from somewhere, speaking in a language Tay could understand. The voice was mechanical, clearly a translation of some kind. It said, "You are awake. This should not be possible. The sedation compound works on all known species. Why are you awake?" Tay did not answer right away. He was too busy trying to control his fear. He took a deep breath, then another. The air tasted strange, like metal and something else he could not name. It burned slightly in his throat and lungs, but he kept breathing. He forced himself to stay calm. "Where am I?" he asked. His voice sounded rough and dry. More clicking sounds. Then the translation came again. "You are on a Valori research vessel. We are studying you. You should not be awake. You should not be able to breathe our air. Our atmosphere is harmful to most species. Why are you not dying?" Tay looked down at his own body. He felt the burning in his lungs. Yes, but it was getting weaker. His body was adjusting. He had read about this in his training. Humans could adapt to many different environments that would kill other creatures. It took time, and it was not comfortable. But they could survive things that seemed impossible. "I am human," he said simply. "We adapt." The gray figures looked at each other. Even without faces that showed emotion, Tay could sense their confusion. Their clicking sounds became faster, more urgent. They were talking to each other about him, and they seemed worried. The one closest to him, the first one who had spoken, leaned closer to the glass. "We have heard stories about humans. Stories that we believed were false. Stories about a death world that creates monsters. Are these stories true?" Tay felt a flash of anger cut through his fear. He did not like being called a monster. He did not like being taken from his bed and put in a glass box like an animal. He stood up, ignoring the cold and his own nakedness, and pressed both hands against the glass. "I am not a monster," he said. "I am an engineer. I fix things. I was sleeping in my room, and you took me. You had no right to do that. Now you will let me go. And you will give me something to wear." The gray figures went silent. None of them moved for a long moment. Then the first one made a sound that the translator turned into words. "You are making demands? You are a captive. Captive species do not make demands. They wait. They hope. They do not speak to their captors this way." "I am not a captive species," Tay said. "I am Kang Tay, citizen of the Korean Federation, resident of Earth. And I am asking you, not as a captive, but as one intelligent being to another, to treat me with basic respect. Give me clothing. Give me answers. And then we can talk about why you took me, and how we can solve this problem." More silence. The gray figures looked at each other again. Then the first one turned back to him and made a gesture with one of its 4 arms. A section of the glass container slid open, and a bundle of fabric was pushed through. It was simple, just a gray covering similar to what the aliens wore, but it was something. Tay took the covering and put it on. It was too big for him, clearly made for creatures with 4 arms, but he managed to wrap it around himself in a way that gave him some dignity. He felt better immediately. It was easier to be brave when he was not standing naked in front of strangers. "Thank you," he said. The first gray figure came even closer now, standing just outside the open section of his container. "I am called Oren in your language. I am the lead researcher on this vessel. We took you because we wanted to understand humans. There are many stories about your species, and we did not know which ones were true." "What kind of stories?" Tay asked. Oren made a sound that the translator turned into something like a sigh. "Stories that say Earth is a death world, a planet covered in poison, filled with predators, burned by radiation from your star. Stories that say humans evolved in this nightmare and became something that should not exist, something that can survive anything, something that other species should fear." Tay thought about Earth. He thought about the ocean near Busan, the forests he had visited as a child, the cities full of life and noise and people. It did not seem like a nightmare to him. It seemed like home. "Earth is not a nightmare," he said. "It is beautiful. Yes, there are dangerous things there. Yes, we had to struggle to survive. But every living thing struggles. That is what life is. Your planet has a gravity that would crush most species, Oren said. Your sun sends radiation that would kill us in minutes. Your oceans are full of acid. Your land animals have teeth and claws and poison. And you call this beautiful? Tay smiled despite himself. I guess it depends on what you are used to. Oren was quiet for a moment. Then she said, We gave you a compound that should have kept you unconscious for many hours. You woke up in less than 1 hour. We filled this room with an atmosphere that should have damaged your lungs beyond repair. You are breathing normally now. We are beginning to believe that the stories about humans are not exaggerations. Tay stepped out of his container slowly. None of the gray figures tried to stop him. They all seemed frozen, watching him with an intensity that felt almost like fear. I am not here to hurt you, Tay said. I did not ask to be taken. But I am here now, and I want to go home. Can we find a way to make that happen? Oren looked at the other researchers. They clicked at each other rapidly. Then Oren turned back to him. We need to study you more, she said. We need to understand what you are. But we will not hurt you. We are scientists, not warriors. We only want knowledge. Tay nodded slowly. He did not trust these aliens completely, but he could see that they were curious rather than cruel. And if he was going to find a way home, he needed to stay calm and work with them rather than against them. Then let us learn about each other, he said. But remember that I am a person, not a specimen. Treat me with respect, and I will do the same for you. Oren made a gesture that might have been a nod. Agreed. We will begin the tests soon. And Kang Tae, citizen of the Korean Federation, resident of Earth. I hope for both our sakes that the stories about humans are not entirely true, because if they are, then we have made a very dangerous mistake by bringing you here. Tae said nothing, but somewhere deep inside him, he felt something shift. He was alone, far from home, surrounded by aliens who saw him as either a subject or a threat. But he was not afraid anymore. He was awake, and he would find his way back. The research deck of the Valori ship was larger than Tae had expected. It stretched out in every direction, filled with machines and tables and screens that displayed information in the strange Valori language. The ceiling was high above him, and the walls curved gently like the inside of a shell. Everything was silver and white and clean, lit by that same soft blue glow that seemed to come from everywhere. Oren walked beside him as they entered the main laboratory. Her forearms moved in patterns that Tae was beginning to understand. When she was calm, they hung loose at her sides. When she was thinking hard, 2 of them would cross over her chest while the other 2 gestured in the air. Right now, all 4 were moving, which meant she was very interested in something. We will conduct several tests, she said through the translator. We want to understand your biology, how your body works, why you survived things that should have killed you. Tae nodded. He had decided to cooperate for now. These aliens had taken him against his will, but they were not being cruel, and the more he learned about their ship, the better his chances of finding a way to escape or send a message home. They brought him to a table covered in equipment. A younger Valori was waiting there, smaller than Oren and with skin that was a lighter shade of gray. This one seemed almost excited, its forearms moving in quick, eager patterns. This is Beck, Oren said. He is a junior scientist on our team. He has been studying humans from a distance for many years. He has many questions. Beck leaned forward, and even without eyes, Tae could feel the intensity of his attention. Is it true that humans can lose parts of their bodies and continue to live? We have records of humans surviving the loss of arms, legs, even parts of their internal organs. How is this possible? Tae thought about it. To him, it was just normal. Humans had always been able to survive terrible injuries. Medicine had gotten better over the centuries, but even in ancient times, people survived things that should have killed them. Our bodies fight to stay alive, he said. When we are hurt, our blood clots to stop the bleeding. Our immune system attacks infections. Our tissues can repair themselves over time. It is not magic. It is just how we evolved. Beck made a clicking sound that the translator turned into wonder. On most worlds, a serious injury means death. There is no recovery. The body simply stops. But humans keep going. They keep fighting. This is remarkable. Orin gestured toward the equipment on the table. We would like to test your healing ability. We will make a small cut on your arm. Very small. We want to see how fast it closes. Tay hesitated. He did not like the idea of being cut. But the wound they were describing sounded minor. And he wanted to show them that humans could be trusted to keep their word. He had agreed to cooperate, so he would cooperate. Okay, he said. But only a small cut. Orin took a thin tool from the table. It looked like a pen with a blade at the end. She pressed it gently against the skin of his forearm and made a cut about 2 centimeters long. It stung. But the pain was not bad. Blood welled up, red and bright against his skin. The Valori watched with intense focus. Beck had taken out a device that seemed to be recording everything. Orin held another device near the wound. Measuring something that Tay could not see, they waited. Minutes passed. Tay watched his own arm as the blood began to slow. The edges of the cut seemed to draw together slightly. The bleeding stopped completely, and then, slowly but visibly, the wound began to close. Beck made a sound of shock. This is impossible. The cellular regeneration rate is far beyond anything in our records. He is healing in real time. We can see it happening. Orin said nothing, but her forearms were completely still now. That meant she was deeply surprised. She had not expected this. By the time an hour had passed, the cut on Tay's arm was almost invisible. Just a faint pink line that would probably disappear completely within a day or two. To him, this was normal. He had gotten cuts before, and they had always healed. But to the Valori, it was like watching a miracle. We need to do more tests, Orin said. Her voice through the translator sounded shaken. We need to understand this. Over the next several hours, they tested everything. They took samples of his blood and studied them under machines that showed images far smaller than any human microscope could see. They measured his body temperature and found that it stayed constant, even when they changed the temperature of the room. They introduced foreign substances to his blood samples and watched in amazement as his immune system destroyed them within minutes. One test made Orin go completely silent. She had taken a sample of a pathogen, a disease that had killed millions of Valori throughout their history. It was safely contained, of course, but even contained, most species would react badly to being near it. Their bodies would show signs of stress, of fear, of recognition that something deadly was close. Tay's body did nothing special. His immune cells in the blood sample simply attacked the pathogen and tore it apart like it was nothing. Like it was just another invader to be destroyed. This disease ended entire colonies, Orin said quietly. We have no cure for it. We can only quarantine and hope, and your blood destroyed it in less than 10 minutes. Tay did not know what to say. He had not done anything special. His body had just done what human bodies do. Fight. Survive. Adapt, Beck spoke up. I have been reading about Earth in our records. I thought the stories were exaggerated. But now I am beginning to understand. Your planet has been trying to kill your species for millions of years. Everything there is dangerous. The gravity crushes you. The weather tries to freeze you or burn you. The other animals want to eat you or poison you. Diseases attack you constantly. And through all of this, humans survived. You evolved to fight against a world that wanted you dead. We did not have a choice, Tay said. We adapt or we die. That is the rule of Earth. That is the rule of death worlds, Orin said. Planets so hostile that intelligent life should never evolve there. But somehow, on some of these worlds, life finds a way. And the creatures that emerge from such places are unlike anything else in the galaxy. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was very serious. Other species have whispered about humans since your kind first appeared among the stars. They call you the monsters from the death world. The survivors who should not exist. The soft things that refuse to break. We thought they were afraid of nothing. We thought the fear was based on ignorance. But now we understand. Tay felt uncomfortable with this description. He did not see himself as a monster or a survivor of nightmares. He was just an engineer who fixed communication arrays and missed the ocean back home, but he could see that the Valori viewed things very differently. To them, humanity was something terrifying and wonderful at the same time. "I am not here to hurt anyone," he said again. "I just want to go home." Beck moved closer to him. "May I ask you questions? Not scientific questions. Personal questions. I want to understand what it is like to be human. To live on a death world, and call it home." Tay looked at the young scientist. Despite everything, he found himself liking Beck. There was something innocent about his curiosity, something genuine about his desire to understand. "Yes," he said. "You can ask me questions. And maybe I can ask some too." They talked for a long time. Beck asked about Earth, about the oceans and the mountains and the cities. He asked about human families, human food, human dreams, and Tay asked about the Valori, about their planet that was cold and quiet, about their culture of science and study, about their fear of conflict and violence. While they talked, something else was happening far away. On the Sol orbital station, Yuna had refused to give up. She had spent hours going through sensor logs, looking for any sign of what had happened to Tay. And finally, she found something, a strange energy reading from the night he disappeared. A pattern that did not match any human technology. Something had been near the station that night. Something had taken her friend. Yuna reported her findings to the station commander. The commander reported to Earth. And within hours, a message was sent to the United Fleet, the military force that protected humanity among the stars. A human citizen had been taken. Someone, or something, had kidnapped one of their own. And humanity would respond. Back on the Valori ship, Tay knew nothing about this. He was still sitting in the research deck, talking with Beck about what it felt like to swim in an ocean, when an alarm suddenly filled the ship. Red lights flashed. The Valori around him began clicking frantically, their forearms moving in patterns of pure panic. Orin appeared beside him, her body tense with fear. "Something is wrong," she said. "Another ship has found us. And it is not friendly." The ship shook as something hit it from outside. Tay grabbed the edge of a table to keep himself standing. He did not know what was happening. But he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, he would face it the same way he faced everything else. By surviving, the ship shook again, harder this time. Tay heard metal screaming somewhere in the distance. The sound of something tearing through the hull. Around him, the Valori scientists were running in every direction. Their clicking voices filled with panic. None of them seemed to know what to do. Orin grabbed his arm with one of her 4 hands. Her grip was surprisingly weak, like a child holding on to an adult. "We must hide," she said through the translator. "The Kresh have found us. They will take everyone. They will make us slaves." "Who are the Kresh?" Tay asked. But even as he spoke, he could hear the answer in the distance. Heavy footsteps. Deep, growling voices. The sound of doors being broken down. "Raiders," Orin said. Her whole body was shaking. "They travel the galaxy looking for ships to capture. They take the cargo. They take the crew. They sell both to the highest bidder. The Valori have no weapons. We cannot fight them. We can only surrender and hope they are merciful." Tay felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not fear. Exactly. Something else. Something older and deeper. A feeling that had been sleeping inside him his whole life. Waiting for a moment like this. "Where can we go?" he asked. Orin pointed toward a corridor on the far side of the research deck. "The lower levels. There are storage rooms where we might hide. But the Kresh will find us eventually. They always do." Quote. Tay looked around the deck. The other Valori were scattering like frightened animals. Beck was standing near a wall, frozen with terror. His 4 arms wrapped around himself. None of them were doing anything useful. None of them were preparing to fight, because they could not fight. The Valori were scientists. They had evolved on a peaceful world where violence was rare. They had no instincts for combat, no training, no weapons. They were completely helpless against creatures like the Kresh. But Tay was not Valori. He was human. "Take Beck and the others to the lower levels," Tay said. "Hide as well as you can. I will try to slow them down." Orin stared at him with her eyeless face. "Slow them down? You have no weapons. You have no armor. You are wearing nothing but a cloth covering. What can you possibly do against the Kresh?" Tay did not have a good answer for that. But he knew one thing. He was not going to hide in a corner and wait to be captured. He was not going to let these aliens who had studied him and talked with him be dragged away to some horrible fate, not without trying to stop it. "I will find a way," he said. "Now go, please." Orin hesitated for a moment. Then she turned and began gathering the other scientists, pushing them toward the corridor. Beck looked back at Ty with something that might have been gratitude or might have been pity. Then they were gone, and Tay was alone on the research deck. He moved quickly through the room, looking for anything that could be used as a weapon. Most of the equipment was delicate, designed for study rather than combat. But in one corner, he found a tool cabinet filled with maintenance supplies. He grabbed a metal rod about the length of his forearm. It was not much, but it was something. The footsteps were getting closer. Tay could hear the Kresh talking to each other now, their voices deep and harsh like stones grinding together. He ducked behind a large machine and waited. The door to the research deck burst open. 3 creatures walked through, and Tay felt his heart skip a beat. The Kresh were massive, easily 2 meters tall and covered in thick, scaled armor that seemed to grow from their skin. They had 2 arms and 2 legs like humans, but their hands ended in claws the length of knives. Their faces were flat and brutal, with small eyes that gleamed with cruel intelligence. Each of them carried a weapon that looked like a combination of a blade and a gun. They moved through the room with the confidence of predators who knew their prey had no chance. One of them spoke. The translator in the room converted its words. "Search everywhere. The Valori are weak. They will be hiding like the prey they are. Find them and bind them. Any who resist can be killed." Tay watched them spread out through the room. He controlled his breathing, forcing himself to stay quiet. The cold feeling in his stomach had grown stronger now. It was not fear. He realized now what it was. It was anger. These creatures had come to take innocent beings as slaves. They were going to destroy lives without a second thought, simply because they were stronger and the Valori were weaker. It was wrong. It was the kind of wrong that Tay could not simply accept. He waited until one of the Kresh passed close to his hiding spot. The creature was looking the other way, scanning the far side of the room. It did not see the human crouching in the shadows behind it. Tay moved. He had never been a fighter. He was an engineer, someone who solved problems with his mind rather than his fists. But in that moment, something ancient woke up inside him, the instincts of a species that had survived a death world, the reflexes of creatures who had fought predators since the beginning of their existence. He swung the metal rod at the back of the Kresh warrior's head. The creature was armored, but there was a gap where the skull met the neck, a vulnerable spot that Tay had noticed without even thinking about it. The rod connected with a crack that echoed through the room. The Kresh stumbled forward, dazed but not down. Tay did not hesitate. He jumped onto the creature's back, wrapping his legs around its torso and his arm around its thick neck. The Kresh roared and tried to throw him off, but Tay held on with strength he did not know he had. He squeezed, cutting off the blood flow to the creature's brain. Seconds passed. The Kresh's struggles grew weaker. Finally, it collapsed. The other 2 Kresh had turned at the sound. They saw their companion on the ground and the small, soft human standing over it. For a moment, they seemed confused. This was not supposed to happen. Prey did not fight back. Prey did not win. Then they charged. Tay grabbed the fallen Kresh's weapon. It was heavy and unfamiliar, but the blade part was simple enough. He dodged the first attacker's swipe, feeling the wind of the claws passing just centimeters from his face. He brought the blade up in response, cutting across the creature's arm. Dark blood sprayed, and the Kresh screamed in pain. The second attacker was smarter. It hung back, trying to get a clear shot with the gun part of its weapon. Tay knew he could not let that happen. He grabbed the wounded Kresh and pulled it in front of him just as the other one fired. The blast hit its own companion in the back, and the creature fell. Now it was one-on-one. The remaining Kresh looked at Tay with something new in its eyes. Not confusion anymore. Fear. "What are you?" it growled. Tay did not answer. He simply attacked. The fight was brutal and ugly. Tay took hits that would have killed a Valori instantly. Claws tore through his covering and into his skin. Blood ran down his arms and chest. But he did not stop. He could not stop. Every wound made him fight harder, like his body was feeding on the pain and turning it into fuel. In the end, the Kresh made a mistake. It overextended with a killing blow, leaving its throat exposed for just a moment. Tay drove the blade forward with all his strength. The creature's eyes went wide. Then it fell. Tay stood alone in the research deck, surrounded by 3 dead Kresh warriors. His body was covered in wounds that were already beginning to close. His hands were shaking, but not from fear, from something else. From the release of energy that had been building inside him since the moment he woke up on this ship. He took a deep breath and looked at the door the Kresh had come through. He could hear more of them in the distance, moving through the ship, capturing Valori wherever they found them. This fight was not over. He picked up one of the Kresh weapons and moved toward the door. His wounds hurt, but the pain was distant now, like something happening to someone else. His mind was clear and focused. He had a job to do. He found Beck first. The young scientist was being held by a Kresh warrior in one of the corridors. Tay came up behind them quietly, and before the Kresh could react, he had cut it down. Beck stared at him with naked shock. "How?" Beck asked. "You are covered in blood. You should be dead." "I am human," Tay said. "We do not die easily. Now come with me. We need to stop the rest of them." Together, they moved through the ship. Beck knew the layout and could guide Tay to where the other Valori were being gathered. Along the way, Tay fought 3 more Kresh. Each battle left him more wounded and more determined. By the time they reached the engine room, he looked like something from a nightmare, covered in his own blood and the blood of his enemies. But the engine room was where the main Kresh force was gathered. At least a dozen warriors, along with the captured Valori, including Orin. There was no way Tay could fight them all. Beck grabbed his arm. "The airlocks," he whispered. "If we can open the airlocks in this section, the vacuum will pull them out. But the Valori will be pulled out too unless they can hold on to something." Tay looked at the captured scientists. They were bound with restraints, unable to move. If he opened the airlocks, everyone in the room would die. But if he did nothing, they would all be taken as slaves anyway. "Can you free them?" he asked Beck. "While I distract the Kresh?" Beck hesitated, then nodded. "I can try." Tay did not give himself time to think about what he was doing. He stepped out into the open and shouted at the Kresh. "Hey, remember me?" Every warrior in the room turned toward him. They saw the blood, the wounds, the weapons in his hands. They saw the bodies of their companions in the corridors behind him, and for the first time in their lives, the Kresh raiders felt something they almost never felt: fear. Tay ran at them. Not to fight them all, but to keep them focused on him, while Beck worked around the edges of the room, cutting the restraints on the Valori prisoners. The Kresh chased him, swinging weapons and firing shots that missed by centimeters. He ducked, rolled, fought back when he could. He was buying time with his own blood. Finally, Beck shouted, "They are free. Everyone hold on to something." The Valori grabbed pipes, handles, anything they could reach. Tay grabbed a structural beam near the wall, and Beck hit the emergency release. The airlock doors blew open. The vacuum of space pulled at everything in the room with terrible force. The Kresh, unprepared and unanchored, were ripped from their feet and dragged toward the opening. They screamed as they tumbled through the airlock and into the endless black beyond. Then the emergency systems kicked in, and the doors slammed shut again. The room was quiet, except for the heavy breathing of the survivors. Tay let go of the beam and slid down to the floor. His whole body hurt. His vision was getting dark around the edges. But when Oren came to stand over him, he managed to look up at her. "Is everyone okay?" he asked. Oren was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that the translator could not quite capture. It sounded like wonder, and respect, and a little bit of terror all mixed together. "Yes," she finally said. "Everyone is okay. Because of you." Tay closed his eyes and let himself rest. Just for a moment. Tay woke up to the sound of voices. Not the clicking speech of the Valori, but human words in a human language. Korean. To be exact, someone was speaking Korean nearby. And for a moment, he thought he was back home in Busan, listening to his mother call him for breakfast. Then reality came back. The pain in his body. The strange ceiling above him. The memory of blood and fighting, and the cold vacuum of space pulling at him. He was lying on a medical bed in a room he did not recognize. His wounds had been treated. Clean bandages covered his arms and chest. Someone had given him proper clothes, simple but comfortable, and standing at the foot of his bed was a woman in a military uniform, watching him with sharp eyes. "Welcome back," the woman said. "You have been sleeping for almost 2 days. The Valori doctors did their best, but they said your body was doing most of the healing itself. They were very impressed." Tay tried to sit up. His muscles protested, but they obeyed. He looked around the room and realized it was not a Valori ship anymore. The design was different, human. He was on a human vessel. "Where am I?" he asked. "You are on the Hana," the woman said, "a warship of Earth's United Fleet. I am Captain Minji. We tracked the Valori ship that took you and intercepted it about 6 hours ago. When we arrived, we found something very unexpected." "What did you find?" Captain Minji smiled, but there was something careful in her expression. "We found a Valori research vessel, with 13 dead Kresh warriors scattered throughout its corridors. We found a crew of Valori scientists who could not stop talking about a human who fought like nothing they had ever seen. And we found you. Unconscious on the engine room floor, covered in enough blood to fill a bucket, but somehow still breathing." Tay did not know what to say. The memories of the fight were clear in his mind, but they felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. He remembered the anger that had driven him. He remembered the feeling of the blade in his hand, the pain of his wounds, the fear in the eyes of the Kresh. But sitting here in a clean room on a human ship, it all seemed unreal. "The Valori," he said. "Are they okay? Oren? Beck? They are fine. A little shaken, but unharmed. They were very concerned about you. The one called Beck asked to see you several times while you were unconscious." Captain Minji paused. "They also gave us a full account of what happened. They told us about the tests they ran on you, the way your body healed, the way you fought. They were remarkably honest about everything, including the fact that they took you without permission." Tay thought about that. The Valori had kidnapped him. They had taken him from his bed and studied him like a specimen. By any reasonable measure, they should be in trouble, but he found that he could not bring himself to be angry at them. They had been curious, not cruel, and in the end, they had been victims of the Kresh, just like he almost was. "I do not want them to be punished," he said. "They made a mistake, but they did not mean any harm. And if they had not taken me, they would all be slaves right now." Captain Minji nodded slowly. "That is generous of you. And as it happens, the Valori have already reached out to Earth with a formal apology and an offer of alliance. They say they have learned something important about humans, and they want to share that knowledge with the rest of the galaxy." "What did they learn?" "That the stories about humans are true. That we are stronger than we look. That we adapt to things that would kill other species. That we fight when we could surrender. That we protect the weak even when it costs us." She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "They say you taught them that lesson personally." A knock came at the door. Captain Minji turned and opened it, and a familiar face appeared. Yuna stepped into the room, and for a moment, she just stood there looking at him. Then she crossed the space between them and hugged him tight enough to hurt his healing wounds. "You idiot," she said into his shoulder. You complete idiot. Do you know how worried I was? I spent 3 days looking for you. I thought you were dead. Tay hugged her back, ignoring the pain. I am sorry. I did not mean to disappear. Yuna pulled back and looked at him with tears in her eyes. The Valori told us everything. They said you killed a dozen Kresh warriors with almost no weapons. They said you were wounded so badly that any other species would have died 5 times over. They said you saved all of them. I just did what I had to do. Captain Minji spoke up. That is exactly what humans do. Tay, we do what we have to do. The galaxy does not understand that yet. They think we are soft because we look soft. They think we are weak because we do not have claws or armor or poison. But they are wrong. And now they are starting to learn. There was another knock at the door. This time, when it opened, Oren stood there. Behind her was Beck, both of them looking uncertain, like they were not sure if they were welcome. We wish to see you, Oren said through a small translation device she carried. To thank you for what you did, and to apologize again for taking you. Tay gestured for them to come in. The room was getting crowded, but he did not mind. You do not need to apologize anymore. What happened? Happened. And in the end, we all survived together. Beck moved forward. I have been telling the other Valori about you. About our conversations. About what I learned. I want everyone to know that humans are not monsters, no matter what the old stories say. You are protectors. You fought for us when you had no reason to. You risked your life for aliens who had done you wrong. Ah, Oren nodded. We will share this story with the other species. We will tell them that humans are not to be feared, but respected. And perhaps, if they are wise, befriended. Captain Minji crossed her arms. That is a nice thought. But I suspect the Kresh will have a different opinion. Tay killed 13 of their warriors. That is not something they will forget. Let them remember, Tay said quietly. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. Let them remember, he repeated. Let them tell stories about the human who fought naked against armored warriors and won. Let them warn each other about the species from the death world that does not know how to give up. Maybe then they will think twice before attacking innocent people. Oren made a sound that the translator turned into something like agreement. That is exactly what we will do. We will tell the galaxy that humans are not prey. You are something else entirely. Something the universe has not seen before. Over the next few days, Tay recovered on the Hana as it traveled back toward Earth. He spent time with Yuna, catching up on everything that had happened while he was gone. He talked more with Oren and Beck, learning about Valori culture and sharing stories about Earth. And he met with Captain Minji several times, answering questions about what had happened and giving his account for the official records. The story spread fast. The Valori shared it with their networks, and from there, it reached other species across the galaxy. Within weeks, the tale of the naked human who destroyed a Kresh raiding party had become legend. Some versions made Tay sound like a superhero. Others painted him as a demon from a nightmare world. But all of them agreed on one thing. Humans were not to be underestimated. Earth received the Valori offer of alliance and accepted it. For the first time in history, humans had a true partnership with another species, built on mutual respect rather than fear or trade. Other species began to reach out too, curious about these strange creatures from the death world who protected those who wronged them. When the Hana finally arrived at the Sol orbital station, a crowd was waiting. News of what Tay had done had reached home, and people wanted to see the man who had become humanity's first true symbol among the stars. Tay stepped off the ship and into a storm of flashing lights and shouted questions. He felt overwhelmed. But Yuna was beside him, and Captain Minji walked ahead to clear a path. He kept his head down and pushed through, making his way toward the station's interior. Later that evening, when the crowds had finally dispersed, Tay found himself alone in his quarters. The same room where everything had started. The climate control had been fixed while he was away, and the air was cool and comfortable now. His old uniform was still on the floor where he had dropped it, though someone had cleaned the room around it. He picked up the uniform and looked at it for a long moment. Then he folded it neatly and placed it on his bed. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. So much had changed. He had started as an ordinary engineer, someone who fixed communication arrays and dreamed of the ocean back home. Now he was something else. A symbol. A legend. A warning to anyone who thought humans were easy targets. But underneath all of that, he was still just Tay. Still the same person who got tired after long shifts and missed the smell of salt water. Still someone who valued kindness over cruelty and would rather talk than fight. He thought about the Valori, about Oren and Beck and all the others he had saved. He thought about the creche, about the fear in their eyes when they realized what they were facing. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had no idea what was waiting for them among the stars. Humanity was about to take a new place in the galaxy. Not as newcomers to be ignored, and not as monsters to be feared. As something in between. Something that other species were only beginning to understand. Tay smiled to himself and turned away from the window. Whatever came next, he would be ready for it. He had faced the worst the galaxy could throw at him and survived. He had woken up naked on an alien ship and walked away with allies and enemies and a legend that would echo through the stars. He was human. And now, the universe knew what that meant.